100 years ago, after the First World War, the cost of goods rose in Canada and workers suffered from low wages and massive unemployment. In the third largest city, Winnipeg, a strike began on May 15, 1919, and did not end until June 26, 1919. The strike was a vital development in the creation of the democratic socialist movement in Canada. The Winnipeg General Strike would later be known for being one of the most famous strikes in all of Canadian history.
Both my grandfathers were there. My one grandfather was 20, my other grandfather was 17. And my one grandfather, the 17-year-old, watched it from the top of the building. And I imagine my 20-year-old grandfather, his parents were also in Winnipeg at the time, and his sister was sick with tuberculosis. I imagine they wouldn't let him go because they knew they were about to lose their daughter to the disease.
Yeah.
And they couldn't afford to lose another child. Their hearts wouldn't have been able to take it. And he said it was terrible to watch from the top of the building. Back in those days, people were, unemployed and hard up for money. In those days in restaurants, on the top of every table, there would be crackers, ketchup, and butter. And so men that had no money would go into the restaurant, order a cup of coffee, and they would make themselves what they called a prairie oyster, which was a cracker with butter around the side, and then they would pour ketchup in the middle, and they called it a prairie oyster, and they could eat that for free while they drank their coffee.
In 1946 in Hamilton, Ontario, more than 2,000 employees went on strike at the Steel Company of Canada, Stelco. The strike was over work-week hours and wages. The strikers managed to disrupt the company's economic flow to such a degree that it ended with the company's full recognition of the United Steelworkers Union.
In July 2009, 3,100 Vale & Co. workers in Sudbury, Ontario went on strike over cuts to bonuses and pensions. The year-long strike became the longest ongoing strike in Canadian history, surpassing the infamous 1978 Inco strike. Because of the sharp rise in nickel prices from $7 US to $11 US a pound, the nickel mining company suffered, thus cutting bonuses to their workers. Not much progress was made in negotiations between the union and Vale & Co. during the year. However, on July 7th and 8th, 2010, 75% of workers voted in favor to end the strike. Although the union claimed the settlement was a significant defeat, it contained improvements over previous offers made by the company. I believe there are definitely worthwhile strikes, and some that aren't necessarily of value or importance. As we learned in the 1919 Winnipeg General Strike, an iconic massive strike in Canada, I believe that because it was something so important to strike for, to improve their working conditions and wages, I believe that is definitely worth fighting for, especially for a whole city to go on strike. It's pretty amazing. Other times, such as the Stelco strike, the company was so disrupted economically that they had to recognize the strikers' requests. I do agree that because strikes happen less frequently, and there aren't any horrible working conditions or wages in Canada, I do believe that striking is less beneficial for everyone these days. As we saw in the 2009-2010 Vale & Co. strike, the longest in Canada, I found it maybe wasn't the most beneficial, especially when they spent a whole year of their lives losing homes and partners and whatever else because they weren't working. It is devastating that those men and women were having their pensions and benefits cut, but for a year of striking for little progress seemed non-beneficial. However, at the same time, I hope the company saw what was going on and do acknowledge that maybe it's not the best idea to cut everyone's benefits, even though they were going through a hard time. If your employees aren't happy, they won't work as hard and won't want to be at work, compared to if they are happy or at least not upset. So in conclusion, I definitely believe strikes can be beneficial, even if they aren't successful to the workers. It is a good way to show the company that many people aren't happy with the current conditions. However, sometimes it has a greater negative effect on the workers and union on strike than the company.